evening and welcome, everyone. My name is Bill Cavanaugh. I am a professor of Catholic Studies here and the director of the Center for World Catholicism and Intercultural Theology here at DePaul Research Center, which deals with the Catholic Church in the Global South, so Africa, Asia, and Latin America. We're very pleased that you're here. We have all kinds of exciting events, so please, if you'd like to be on our mailing list, just sign up at the desk there. There's lots of good food, so help yourself to it. We always do hospitality as best we can, and please feel free to get up at any time and replenish your plates. So tonight we're very excited to have Father Amado Picardal with us. He's going to talk about a country that last year elected a tough-talking, profane, populist president who was elected in part on the promise to get tough on a certain group of people in the country that was scapegoated. I'm not talking about the United States, I'm talking about the Philippines, of course. The situation there is very serious. 20,000 people have been killed with no trial and no further ceremony than a bullet. One of the things that is remarkable about our speaker tonight is the courage with which he has taken on this cause. And this is not something new. He was a priest in Duterte's city of Davao, where he was mayor and began his campaign of extrajudicial killings. And since he's become president of the Philippines, Father Picardal has taken this campaign nationally. And this is an act of courage. His life has been threatened. This is not something that one does lightly. So he comes here not simply to speak about this as an outsider or as an academic, but someone who has, in a very real sense, laid his life on the line for the protection of others. He's member of the Redemptorist Congregation in the Philippines. He holds a licentiate in theology from the Jesuit School of Theology in Berkeley, that's California, and a doctorate in theology from the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome. And since 2011, he has served as executive secretary of the Committee on Basic Ecclesial Communities of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines. That's the kind of local small church gatherings that are really at the heart of Catholicism in the Philippines and in many other parts of the world, and has become a very strong advocate for peace and human rights, and has served as the spokesperson of the Coalition Against Summary Execution since 2003, and of the Network Against Killings in the Philippines since the election of President Duterte in 2016. So if you all would all please join me in welcoming Father Amado Picardal.
Good evening. Magandang gabi po sa mga kababayan. I wish to thank Dr. Davao for the invitation to talk about what the church is doing in response to the extrajudicial killings in the Philippines. And the last time I was here in Chicago was in 1989 during the Christmas break while studying at Berkeley, California, and I never expected to be back 28 years later to talk about burying the dead. An unusual, if not a morbid topic. Let me begin with a passage from the book of Prophetic, which is the basis for the burying the dead as a corporal work of mercy. and I quote, "If I saw one of my people who had died and been thrown behind the wall of Nineveh, I used to bury him. Sennacherib returned from Judea, having fled during the days of the judgment enacted against him by the King of Heaven because of the blasphemies he had uttered. Whomever he killed, I buried. For in his rage he killed many Israelites, but I used to take their bodies away by stealth and bury them." You know, the Center for World Catholicism and Intercultural Theology has been offering talks about the corporal works of mercy, and this is the third talk for this year. And of course, my topic that was given to me is about burying the dead, especially in the context of the Philippine situation. Under ordinary circumstances, we do not usually think of burying the dead in terms of the corporal work of mercy. It is something that we do for a deceased member of our family, for a friend, or a colleague. It is part of the ritual of grieving and saying goodbye. However, from where I come from, it has become meaningful to regard burying the dead, especially the victims of extrajudicial killings, as one of the corporal works of mercy. I first became aware of this when, as a priest assigned in Davao, I was asked by a vegetable vendor, a poor woman, Clarita is her name, to preside at the funeral service of her 15-year-old son named Fernando, who was killed by the Davao death squads. 3 of her teenage sons were previously killed by the DDS. Fernando was the 4th. Now, as the killings continue with impunity all over the country, the bodies pile up. I have become more aware that burying the dead is indeed a corporal work of mercy. Many of the killing fields are in the urban slum areas or urban poor communities of major cities. And most of the victims are poor. And many of them drug users and addicts, suspected drug users and addicts. Also pushers, whose names were on the list compiled by barangay officials and the PIDEA, the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agencies. You know, barangay leaders or village heads are required to compile names of who they consider as criminals, especially addicts and users and pushers. And they are submitted. And this is the list that is drawn. I call this Duterte's list. You know, in Davao before, Duterte would read the names in the list in his TV program, Gikan sa Masa para sa Masa. And in a matter of weeks, those in the list would be dead. And this is what has been happening also since he became President of the Philippines. Those killed were not just men, but also women and minors. Of course, the most well-known case is the 7-year-old Kian de los Santos. He was the 54th minor killed. You know what was unique about Kian was the police claimed that he fought back. But there was a CCTV that caught what really happened. He was shot point blank. And when he died, they put a gun. But it was in his left hand. And that was a proof that it was not, he did not fight back. It was execution. These killings are considered as a strategic component on the war on drugs. Duterte claimed that there are over 3 million addicts in the Philippines. He said Hitler massacred 3 million Jews. There is 3 million drug addicts in the Philippines. There are. I'd be happy to slaughter them. Although the head of the Dangerous Drug Board said that the real figure is 1.8 million users, not even addicts. But because he dared to contradict the figures that Duterte gave, he was sacked. And Duterte, during the election campaign, promised to get rid of criminality, drugs, and corruption within 3 to 6 months. And that is why that he won. What is the logic of extrajudicial killings? Why is this at the heart of the war on drugs? Killing the users, the addicts, would be a deterrent and would lessen the demand for drugs, since many would stop or avoid using drugs out of fear. That is why that if the drug addicts are killed, then of course they think that others will be discouraged from using drugs and they would surrender. Since drug addicts are prone to commit crimes like stealing and murder, killing them would lessen criminality. To be a drug user, a drug addict, is to be a criminal. And also that the president and his henchmen doubt whether addicts are still human. They are like the zombies, especially those using shabu. And therefore should be eliminated. They don't have rights. And that is why that even his supporters would justify. Anyway, we are killing addicts who are also criminals. And they deserve to die. And you know, because the focus is on drug users and addicts, there's really very little less effort to go after the big time, the drug lords. And of course, during a Senate investigation, where there was tons of shabu that entered through the Bureau of Customs. You know, one of the witnesses said that it was the Davao group that facilitated the entry of drugs from China. And one of the members of the Davao group allegedly was Paulo Duterte, the son of the president. These killings are perpetrated by units within the police force and the death squads made up of policemen and civilian assets. And this is part of the Oplan double barrel or Tokha. The war on drugs coupled with extrajudicial killings has been President Duterte's obsession since he was mayor of Davao, where the death squads originated. You know those two guys there? They were the original members of the Davao death squads. The policeman was Las Cañas, the civilian asset Edgar Matubato. And they were the ones that confirmed that Duterte formed the DDS in 1988. Reuters reported that many AJK that is happening in Metro Manila are being carried out by police special units called the Davao Boys. They all came from Davao, they are operating in Manila and other major cities. You know, one of the heads is called Chief Inspector Patay. And Patay is the Cebuano word for kill. I was assigned in Davao for 16 years after I finished my studies in Rome from 1995 up to 2011. That was during the height of the DDS killings. And during those years, I personally witnessed the immediate aftermath of extrajudicial killings. Once, while I was officiating a wedding, it was a 4 o'clock wedding, I heard shots outside my car. And after the mass, I went out, and there I saw people milling around. I think this guy was already dead. Luckily, I was shot already. And then I asked what happened. I said, oh, the DDS, calling DDS were here. Another time was while I was biking. I was going uphill, and then I met, you know, guys on motorbikes. And then once I reached that place, there was already the dead guy. And I said, did you not meet those DDS? And again, what's wrong? I said, he stole cell phones and he uses drugs. I was one of the leaders of the coalition against summary execution. I was the, in fact, I was the spokesperson. She said, Father, you'll be the spokesperson. Why? Anyway, you don't have a family. You know, my companions were lawyers and everything, but they were so scared in their life. You know, so I don't have a family, so nobody will cry for you. Our group monitored unexposed and opposed the killings. Actually, the monitoring started 10 years after the death squads were formed. It was in 1998. I was involved with non-government organizations for street kids. And during that time, 1998, 2 of their wards, 14 years old, were killed by members of the DDS. And while we were even having a memorial, we heard shots. Because again, there were killings that were happening while we were having a memorial service. We assisted in the investigations that were carried out by the United Nations Human Rights Council. They actually sent a special rapporteur, Philip Goldstone, and also the Human Rights Watch. It did an investigation. The report, you can die anytime. We assisted them with providing witnesses, former hitmen, members of the family who were witnesses also. And also the Commission of Human Rights that was headed at the time by Laila de Lima. I was her text mate. To text me, I will be arriving there in a couple of days, prepare the witnesses. And we would hire the witnesses in the archbishop's residents in various rooms, and this is where they would meet them individually. In 2016, just before the elections, I circulated a report entitled The Victims of the Davao Death Squads. I actually posted it in my blog. And this is based on a case of extrajudicial killings monitored by the coalition. covering 1998 to 2015. You know, it's in Excel form, with all the details, but I just summarized. And these were some of the reports that covered that period. A total of 1,424, 1,367 male, 57 female, 132 minors killed, 17 and below, 126 boys and 6 girls. The youngest was 12 years old, a boy, and a 15-year-old girl. And young adults, 476, that is 18 and then 612 older adults, and 201 victims whose age we were not given. These were all documented, you know, not just the names, age, you know, what happened, you know, all the details. Since the beginning of the Duterte presidency, the killings have multiplied in less than 2 years. You know, it's over 16,000, but actually, when there was a report that was submitted by the government, it's even more than that. You know, based on the government report covering July 1, 2016 to November 27, 2017. This was what the paras reported. Barangays, the villages, declared drug-free, 4,747, and then drug personalities arrested, 118,287. Drug personalities killed, 3,967. These were killed by supposed to be policemen, legitimate police operations, and declared default back. And the last one is so-called homicide cases under investigation, 16,355. These were killed by unknown gunmen. Of course, the government knows who they are. These are the shadowy death squads, composed of off-duty policemen, not in uniform, and also assets, civilian assets, usually operate on motorbikes. They call them riding in tandem. So if you total of 3,967 and 16,355, that's almost 20,000. That's up to November 27. It's now ending January. When we're looking at that data, there was an average of around 1,000 people killed each month. You know that those who were killed within 2 years are much higher than those killed during the entire Marcos dictatorial era, from 1972 to 1986, and it's just almost 2 years. The killings are not limited to drug-related cases. Human rights activists, those linked with militant left, leaders of indigenous peoples, the Lumats, have been targeted. Recently, a priest, Father Tito Paez, was killed. According to the CBCP, the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines, the statement, he was not just an EJK victim, but also a martyr. You know, Tito Paez was 72 years old, and throughout his life, during the Marcos regime, has been consistently a human rights advocate. And what is emerging now is that there are two types of death squads. One is mostly composed of policemen and assets, and they go after drug personalities, especially drug users and pushers. The other one is another group composed of military men that goes after the so-called subversives, the threats to national security, the leftists, those who are against the president. and the bodies continue to pile up. If the trend continues, you could have over 70,000 extrajudicial killings by the end of Duterte's term in 2022. This is what we are looking at. There will be more dead bodies to come. So the question is, faced with these killings, what is the church's response? Burying the dead is the immediate answer. Since most of the AJK victims are poor, that's why the war on drugs is a war on the poor. The families of victims can hardly afford funeral expenses, which have been jacked up. Ordinarily, a cheap funeral, in parlor is 10,000 pesos. You can even get 7,500 pesos. That's around $100 plus. But because they're AJK victims, the police insists that should be brought to accredited funeral parlors. And they have to go medical legal examination. And the price is jacked up to 50,000 to 60,000 pesos. From 7,000 to 10,000 to 50,000 to 60,000 pesos. And who could afford that? They've lost a breadwinner. And 50,000, how much do they have to work for that? That's around 7 months of work, for the poor, or even more than that. And we made some investigation why this has become so expensive. Of course, the excuse was we have to go to America. But the real excuse is that part of that goes to the police. As I say, they made a killing out of the killings. When they kill, they get money. And then the funeral also, they still get money. And there are families who just leave the corpses in the funeral parlor because they cannot afford to pay to bury them until these bodies are dumped in common graves. And they pile up there and say, what are we going to do with this? The families are going to put it upward. So they're dumped in common graves. There are bodies of AJK victims that have been dumped in the Manila Bay. One of the campaign promises of the president, that 1,000, that will become 100,000, and the fish in Manila Bay will be fattened. Of course, that is one of the campaign promises that is being fulfilled because the fish in the Manila Bay have been fattened. And there are some witnesses who claim that, police got the bank and then put them down there. And this is what Matubato, the one, but this is what we were doing earlier on in Davao, to dump the bodies into the sea with weights. Others are in distant areas. Of course, this was being done to lower the body count, especially once there was an uproar coming from international groups. Thus, the church's response to bury the dead is indeed a corporal work of mercy. Speak about a corporal work of mercy. These are the cases, the instances where burying the dead is indeed a corporal work of mercy. There are parishes and religious communities that provide financial assistance for burial expenses. For example, I belong to the Redemptorist Community, and we have already spent over ₱1 million just for assistance, funeral assistance. Otherwise, the bodies will not be buried. And some of the parishes are doing that. Rituals are part of burying the dead. That's why that speak about praying for the victims of extrajudicial killings. Wake. That's Father Danny Pilario of Vincentian in Payatas, going to some of the houses of the victims of the Davao, of the death squads. Masses are also performed. That's Father Jerome, a Redemptorist, in his area in Cavite. Just area alone. In 1 week, he had to say 6 masses for members of the community. You know, we have to debrief him. Has to go through a lot of debriefing because, you know, what is, you know, a young priest newly ordained saying mass for this, you know. Sometimes you have to become strong, to become tough, you know, but at the same time, there is numbness that the priest has to go through, facing the family and looking at the victims of the killings. There are also celebrated memorial masses for AJK victims and their families. You know, so the so-called Holy Eucharist Mass action. Another Vincentian, Father Bong Sarabia, also started this. These are the occasions for families of victims to tell their stories. That is a girl who saw her father being executed in front of her. Again, these are the priests that celebrated during the masses for the extrajudicial victims of extrajudicial killings. And the families were there. They brought out the pictures of their loved ones. The families of victims are often in shock and traumatized after witnessing the brutal death of their loved ones. And there are groups within the church that provide psychospiritual debriefing and therapy for the families of victims to help them cope with their shock and their grief. And this is very important for them. That is why there are sessions that are being done for them. This is Father Bong Sarabia again, the Vincentian priest, and his group composed of volunteer psychologists to deal with families undergoing shock and grief. And families of victims are poor and need financial aid. Church groups and agencies provide socio-economic aid like charity and IGP, livelihood projects for their families. And various groups have been set up to provide assistance to families of AJK victims. That is why that there is a group that was formed by Father Danny Pilario, the so-called SOW, Support for Orphans and Widows. Actually, they have a Facebook page if you want to help them financially carry out that program. Just look at the details there. It's Father Danny Pilario because he's working in Payatas. This is a dump site where there are communities there, and many of the members of the community have been killed. And they form a group, the families of victims of orphans and widows. They have regular monthly gathering for ongoing psycho-spiritual counseling. And the Diocese of Davao has a scholarship program for the children of the AJK victims. There are church people involved in monitoring and documenting cases of human rights violations. Catholic universities like La Salle, Ateneo, work together with the Commission of Human Rights and our group and Network Against Violence in the Philippines, and also with the media, in order to document the cases, because numbers are not enough. They have to go, there has to be documentation. Who are these people killed? Why were they killed? What happened? You know, where were they killed? Who are the units? Who are the units involved in their killings? This is very important because someday those who carried out these killings will be held accountable, and we need those documentations. Providing support for photojournalists. You know, there are what is called the night crawlers. Every night they go out with their, these are photojournalists. And one of them is actually a Redemptorist, Brother June Santiago. And that they exhibit their photos in churches. Actually, in Baclaran last year, these photos were actually exhibited for people to see what has been happening. Sometimes pictures, not just the numbers, but the pictures, what happened, who were killed, no matter how gruesome they are the ones that will awaken the conscience of people. We also collaborate with the Commission of Human Rights and human rights groups and civil society organizations to hold the perpetrators accountable before the local courts and the International Criminal Court. Groups within the church are collaborating with law groups to provide legal aid for investigation and filing of cases against police involved in extrajudicial killings. There is a religious sister, Sister Ninette Danyo, a member of the RGS, who live among the urban poor communities in Manila, and they have organized the members of the community to file a writ of amparo to protect the community from police harassment. Because the police really came back just to harass the families, and so that they will not turn witness. And the Supreme Court actually done them a writ of amparo. The police are not supposed to enter that area unless for legitimate reasons, especially those already identified with the killings. There are also members of the clergy and religious communities that provide sanctuary to witnesses. These guys are the key witness, and there are also some that have been surfaced. And it's actually, the church is capable of hiding them, not really honest. They're just for the press conference, because it's the church who's capable of hiding them. We have rectories, we have seminaries, retreat houses, novitiate houses, and everything, even convents of the madres that can hide our witnesses, because they do not trust the witness protection program of the government. Matubato, when Duterte was elected, he was told he was under a witness protection program. He was told by the DOJ, we cannot assure of your protection. So he came to me and asked for sanctuary, and I passed, after hiding him several times, then I had to consult the bishops. And that's how we started that sanctuary program. And other witnesses also that have sought sanctuary. Some bishops have pledged to provide sanctuary to witnesses, including police involved in extrajudicial killings. There are many convents, seminars, retreat houses where these witnesses can be accommodated. And someday these witnesses will be testifying in the ICC, International Criminal Court, with the support of some priests, religious, and lay people. That's our lawyer, Jude Sablo, whom we sent to The Hague to start filing the information. We're just waiting for the result. We have a witness in The Hague already ready for that. Confronted with these killings, the church has not been silent. She has consistently exercised her prophetic role. In a post-election statement, the CWCIT came out with a position of a vigilant collaboration vis-a-vis the new Duterte administration, similar to the very critical collaboration stance of the church during the Marcos dictatorial regime. As part of her prophetic mission, the church acts as conscience of society. This means making people aware of the evil around them, especially the culture of death, to break the numbness and apathy, and learning to breathe, to denounce extrajudicial killings, the violation of human rights, and the lack of due process and the abuse of those in power, to announce the gospel of life, of justice, and of peace, and calling people to conversion. and to seek justice and accountability for these killings. This is the role of the church as a prophetic community. Since the beginning of the Duterte presidency, the CWCIT has already came out with 3 pastoral letters denouncing extrajudicial killings. The first one in September 2016, and the second one in February 2017, which was read in the churches all over the Philippines. The latest was in September 2017, which was the strongest so far, and which called for the tolling of the De Profundis bells in the churches all over the Philippines to pray for the victims of extrajudicial killings. The September 2016 pastoral letter is a call to mourn for those who have died, including victims of extrajudicial killings. According to the bishops, we mourn with you at the deaths that we have seen in our communities. Violent, senseless deaths in the hands of our brother Cain. Unnecessary deaths by sickness and accidents, deaths from terror bombing in Davao, deaths of babies caused by their own mothers, deaths because of police encounters, deaths from extrajudicial killings. Indeed, every death is cause for mourning, because in the death of every man or woman, in the untimely death of every child or infant, a part of us dies. Our hearts reach out in love and compassion to our sons and daughters suffering from drug dependence and addiction. Drug addicts are children of God, equal in dignity with the sober ones. Drug addicts are sick brethren in need of healing, not criminals deserving of new life nor death. There are patients begging for recovery. They may have behaved as scum and rubbish, but the saving love of Jesus Christ is first and foremost for them. No man or woman is ever so unworthy of God's love. And another one is from the Pastoral Letter 2017. We, your bishops, are deeply concerned due to many deaths and killings in the campaign against prohibited drugs. This traffic in illegal drugs need to be stopped. Okay, I just go back to that pastoral letter before. This pastoral letter is prophetic in the sense that it invites the nation to grieve and mourn for those who have lost their lives, including the AGK victims. It also affirms that addicts are children of God, equal in dignity, and they have rights, contrary to the President's pronouncement. They are not to be regarded as criminals to be killed, but sick brethren in need of healing, in contrast to the government's view. Christ-saving love is first and foremost for them. So the pastoral letter in 2017. We, your bishops, are deeply concerned due to many deaths and killings in the campaign against prohibited drugs. This traffic in illegal drug needs to be stopped and overcome, but the solution does not lie in the killing of suspected drug users and pushers. We are concerned not only for those who have been killed. The situation of the families of those killed is also cause for concern. Their lives have only become worse. An additional cause of concern is the reign of terror in many places of the poor. Many are killed not just because of drugs. Those who kill them are not brought to account. An even greater cause of concern is the indifference of many to this kind of wrong. It is considered as normal, and even worse, something that according to them needs to be done. The life of every person comes from God. It is He who gives it, and it is He alone who can take it back. Not even the government has a right to kill life, because it is only God's steward and not the owner of life. The opportunity to change is never lost in every person. This is because God is merciful, as our Holy Father, Pope Francis, repeatedly teaches. So there is an invitation to healing. This is the one that was released in 2017. Our Catholic bishops in the Philippines appealed for a season of mourning and prayer for the dead from September 23 until November 1 this year by daily rosary, church bell ringing, and candle lighting at 8 o'clock each night for the victims of the spreading culture of killings. The whole message of this 40-day period was to stop the killing. I'm inviting you and the communities with you to participate in the second phase of this period of praying for the victims of extrajudicial killings. We'll start on November 5 until December 8, the Solemnity of the Immaculate Conception. This was signed by the President of the CBCP, Archbishop Soc Villegas. Individual bishops have came out with their own pastoral letters, including Bishop Soc Villegas, Cardinal Tagle, Bishop Tony Ledesma, who even before the election warned the faithful about voting for the mayor responsible for the extrajudicial killings. The most vocal of either condemnation is Bishop Abilio and Bishop Pablo David, whose diocese in Caloocan has the most number of extrajudicial killings. So on November 5, 2017, the Mass for Stop the Killing, Start the Healing was celebrated in EDSA's shrine, followed by a procession attended by over 15,000 people. The MRSP also came out with statements condemning EJK, so as individual religious congregations, like the Jesuits, the Redemptorist, Marist, and the Council of the Laity also denounced the killings. And many of the priests have also denounced the killings and preached about the value of life. Streamers about the Fifth Commandment are posted in churches in various parts of the country. Priests, nuns, seminarians are helping organize and participate to protest and prayer rallies against extrajudicial killings, together with lay people. Anti-AJK and anti-capital punishment and anti-war are being integrated in the pro-life advocacy. And some of you may be familiar with Cardinal Bernardin's consistent ethic of life. This is where the pro-life movement is moving towards, expanding to include the anti-AJK and anti-war. The Church prophetic stance has created tension between the church and the Duterte administration. Duterte is accused the church of being full of shit and the most hypocritical institution. He threatened to destroy the church by exposing the sexual abuses of the clergy. He said that instead of helping solve the drug problem, the church has done nothing but criticize. But the church is not just criticizing or speaking out against extrajudicial killings. It is also doing something. To address the drug problem and prevent more killings, community-based rehab programs have been set up in parishes and dioceses all over the country. Psychologists and psychotherapists are helping in this process, and volunteers are being trained to help facilitate these programs. In early September 2016, the Diocese of Novaliches started its drug rehabilitation program. In October 2016, the Diocese of Caloocan launched its task force Salubong, its own version of drug rehabilitation, where not only the drug users and drug pushers who surrendered to the authorities were rehabilitated, but also the respective families and community. The psychiatrists and psychologists, doctors and nurses and social workers volunteered to participate in the program. And the Council of the Laity of Caloocan sponsored a concert to raise funds to support the task force Salubong. Cardinal Luis Tagle officially launched the Sanlakbay para sa pagbabagong buhay. It's Tagalog for the Journey Towards Newness of Life program on October 23 in Manila Cathedral, where he encouraged parishioners to volunteer at the parochial and rehab centers. Catholic parishes are working with local government to provide drug rehab and prevention centers to meet the needs of growing numbers of recovering addicts. The Sanlakbay program is a response of the Catholic Church to the rising concern in handling the influx of thousands of drug surrenderies resulting from the present administration's war on illegal drugs. The program strengthened the preventive phase of restorative justice ministry of the Caritas Manila, aimed at helping in the healing, the rehabilitation, and restoration of drug surrenderies and their families through spiritual formation, counseling, livelihood projects, and skills formation training, as well as arts and cultural program and sports activities for holistic development. And under the Sanlakbay program, drug surrenderies and their families can undergo 3 to 6 months counseling and 2 to 3 months economic empowerment program to make them financially stable. You'll also participate in weekly and monthly sports and cultural programs in the parishes for their physical and creative development. And those requiring 6 months to a year-long intensive intervention will be given the necessary care in private pastoral rehabilitation center. There are 2 centers run by the church for intensive, those live-in program for those really who are really addicted. The Center for Family Ministries, the University of Santo Tomas Graduate School, Psychotrauma, the Department of Interlocal Government, and Philippine Drug Important Agency have been tapped to be part of the program. So to recap, burying the victims of AGK is an act of corporal work of mercy carried out by the Catholic Church in the Philippines were the victims of extrajudicial killings. The Church is also responding to the needs of families of AGK victims, psycho-spiritual and economic and educational assistance. Above all, the Church is also exercising a prophetic role, condemning extrajudicial killings, promoting the human dignity and human rights, demanding justice for the victims, calling for accountability against the perpetrators, providing sanctuary to witnesses. The Church acts a conscience of society. She calls people to conversion. Stop the killing, start the healing. This is her appeal. The Church is in the forefront to heal those drug users and addicts targeted for extrajudicial killings through community-based drug rehab program. As darkness falls in the Philippines once again under another bloody and authoritarian regime, the Church is playing a vital role to be the light in the midst of darkness. Let me end with these lines that express the hope of our people. I long for the day when burying the dead will no longer be regarded as a work of mercy for unknown suspected addicts or enemies of the state brutally murdered in front of their children or parents by death squads on the order of a bloody, thirsty ruler, leaving behind a multitude of widows and orphans, wallowing in inconsolable grief and anger. I long for the day when burying the dead will simply be the final act of farewell to the beloved who has lived life to the full and is on a final journey to our heavenly home. Our hearts full of sadness. Thank you for listening.
If you have a question for Father Picardal, please come to the microphone in the middle because we're recording this to post on our website.
Father, I am actually sickened by your presentation. I need to go home. It is sickening. My question to you is, what does justice look like to you? Why are these perpetrators, particularly the Philippine National Police, to whom Duterte gave the order? He gave the order. Why don't the bishops go to Malacanang and confront Duterte and say, enough? And get those PNP officers in jail. Make justice look real. The bishops cannot just talk and talk and talk and send out 3 letters, 1 every 3 months. It's just words. But the real question is, what does justice look like for all of us who really cannot live with the reality of death the way it comes to us?
Okay, the first question is, as a bishops, reach out to the person they have. It was composed of his friend, the Archbishop of Davao, Alges. Cardinal Tagle was there also. And there were 4 bishops who went to Malacanang to talk with the president, to reach out, to enter into dialogue, and to bring all these concerns. The problem is you cannot dialogue with a president. He does not listen. You can go there every day, but it will have no effect because his mind is already made up. And we have a psychiatrist. This is not the record, but we have the psychiatric report that was actually made during the annulment phase. And one of the things that stand out is there's no sense of guilt and remorse. What do you call that? A person who lacks sense of remorse and guilt. And that is at the core, that he said that the killings will not stop. So what can you do? And that is why you can denounce and denounce, but we do not stop denouncing, even if it will have no effect on you. Because what is important is also how do you awaken the conscience of the people. And the problem is, of course, we can pray for his conversion, or we can pray that the Lord will deliver us from evil, whatever it needs. But other than that, it will continue.
Father, it is obvious that the Filipino people have elected a psychopath for president. A matter of practicality for defense against a psychopathic president, how do we assure that the people that the church gives protection to are not actually planted by the president to identify the locations where these people are being given shelter?
We are very careful in vetting those who enter our sanctuary program. They go through a process. But that is still the risk that you're prepared to take. Even if they know where, there's so many. I said that the Catholic Church has so many convents, monasteries, formation houses, and everywhere that they cannot guess where, these witnesses are placed. Remember, there's always a time for accounting. No matter how long it will take, but when the time comes, we are ready, we are prepared. Because evil will not reign forever and ever. And we have learned that during the Marcos era, no matter how long it will take, but we hope it is quicker because, can you just imagine? By the end of 2022, that is the end of this term, unless there are changes in the Constitution that will again erase the term limits, this is what they're trying to do. By 2022, we have over 72,000 deaths in our hands. That's why there is a pressure in the International Criminal Court to act on the complaint that has been filed. And we know that they are starting to act because even without the case that are being filed yet, the information is there. The fact that they're willing to accept our witness and to render protection, that is something. He is there in the Hague already. And that is why we are going to send more. Not just the killers, but also the victims who saw their loved ones being killed. And that is what we are doing. And that is why that, we have to hope against hope. Let us do what we can. We can continue to denounce. Of course, we know that denouncing is not enough. You have to do something concrete. Make sure, that's why you have to deal. I mean, many of our parishes and our sisters have to deal with local policemen to awaken their conscience, telling them, do not kill, we'll take care of this. That's why one of those policemen who received the 10 Outstanding Young Men Award was a police officer. 0 death. And he cooperated with the parish in this drug rehabilitation program. It can be done. And some of the priests who are running these rehabilitation programs were addicts themselves when they were young. There are 2 of them. They're able to prove that even an addict can reform and can even become a priest. And this is what we're trying to prove, because to 30, he does not want rehab. It is too expensive. He's not even willing to set aside money for that. And this is where the church comes in. First is, how do we make sure that the killings, that this will be lessened? It will not stop, but at least it will be lessened. And we're dialogue with other policemen. Policemen also have conscience. The number of policemen going to confession in Baclaran, talking about what they have done, has actually arisen. Of course, I'm not going to break the seal of confession. But, among us priests, when we talk about, those policemen with conscience. And even, what happened to those, our top witnesses were former hitmen, very brutal. They told me how they killed. But there's a point when the conscience will hit them, especially when they're ordered to kill pregnant women and a 5-year-old child whom they become close to. Make it clean, no witnesses. Can I just deliver him to another town, No, it's to be clean. But that's what we are preparing. That there will be some of them that will turn and become witnesses. And some of them have resigned already, or some have applied for schooling.
I have 2 questions. Question number 1 is, you mentioned that there's a second death squad, primarily composed of military, that deals with subversives, so-called subversives. Are they actually targeting Muslim terrorists? I think they call them modos. And if so, how's that going? That's question number 1. Question number 2 is, this death campaign has been built on the premise, supposedly, of reducing crime at the end, reducing crime. And has that actually happened, aside from these extrajudicial killings? Has crime gone down because of this?
Okay, the first question is, there are no operations of death squad against, it's really an actual, these are combat units going after Muslim terrorists. So that's different. But when I speak about death squads, these are the ones that go after civilians. Well, we talk about subversive. They're not going after NPA. They're going after what they term as sympathizers, or even some human rights activists, some even journalists, who are a threat to this government. Again, it's during the martial law, these were the targets, criminals, and then the leftists. Actually, I was almost a victim of extrajudicial killings because I was arrested the first anniversary of martial law. I was a student activist. I was tortured and was imprisoned for 7 months. And they put, during the first 1 week of torture, they put a gun into my mouth and cocked it. I thought that was they called it at the time salvaging, and they were then doing it for others that they have picked up. So the second question that you asked is, as it broke down that it hasn't. Especially murder. Look at Davao. Was supposed to be Exhibit A. After over 20 years, there are still drug addicts. Davao is the number 1 in murder, number 2 in rape. So in terms of dealing with crime, killing is not really a deterrent.
Hi, hello po. My name is Lorena. I am an immigrant from Mindanao as well. And I really appreciate you coming here because I was part of a couple of mission trips through the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines. And we were hearing historically of priests like Father Pops Tintorio is an Italian Roman Catholic priest who was killed for his support of indigenous people's struggles. So historically, human rights violations have been happening, and it takes a lot of guts to speak up. So I really appreciate you coming here and speaking up about that. I wrote this down so I put my hand. I wanted to ask about the Stop the Killings that you mentioned. I think we here in the United States, especially in Chicago, we're not foreign to police crimes. There's been a lot of black killings here. There's a lot of raids by ICE. And as people of God, that's against what we believe in, where we stand up for giving people shelter when they need it. And can you speak a little bit more about the Stop the Killings that you mentioned? Is it just for the police, or is it also for the military that has been historically being used to harass communities? And you mentioned that there was a question about the role of us here in the United States. I know Trump promised Duterte when he went to the Philippines in November, he promised $152 million of our taxpayers' money, and $2 million of that going to the police. So what can our role be here as people in the United States who have a voice? And third question, I know that there's being organized a national speaking tour that's going to start lobbying in Washington, D.C. in April through the Ecumenical Lobbying Week, I think is what it was, about the Cardin-Rubio bill, which is a bill that's being talked about in the Senate, that was introduced in the Senate to hinder sending U.S. military aid to the Philippines. What are your thoughts on the bill and like the speaking tour that's happening this April?
Okay, the first question, all I have stopped the killing is really, it's not just for the police. It's really for those who ignore the due process of the law and ignore the Fifth Commandment. Because it's against God's commandment and against the law. We do not have capital punishment in the Philippines, so there should be no shortcut. And this is addressed because I said earlier on, those are being killed are not just suspected drug addicts or users, but although majority of them are. Some are collateral damage, but some also, I said that the other one is the so-called leftists or others, human rights advocates, and even the priests. So we speak about Stop the Killing campaign is, it's really against the culture of death, and to ignore the law, and again, it's against you stop the authoritarian, the brutal policies, okay, and to focus on the healing and to address the roots of the problem. About what you can do. Actually, there was last year, that was in July. Remember that the U.S. Congress had approved on the extrajudicial killings in the Philippines. Was that Tom Lantin?
Tom Lantos. Tom Lantos.
Tom Lanton, that was a good start. In fact, already, they're supposed to ship 20,000 worth of funding for the police. That has been stopped. So those are, because right now, on our own in the Philippines, we can do everything that we will have not much impact. We need international support, pressure from outside. That's even, of course, pressure from Congress, from Senate, and from everywhere, from the UN. And this is where I think it's, in the South African campaign, remember, it was the pressure from outside that forced them to change their policies, and I hope that this is also going to happen in our country, because he controls Congress, he controls the judiciary, he controls the police. Military, yeah, he does, but there are some units he cannot control. So we need the support of not just Filipinos, but others outside are concerned about what is happening.
Thank you, Father. My name is Timothy. And just to follow on to the last question, what are other governments beside the United States doing in terms of either sanctions on the regime, or trying to influence behavior of the regime, or maybe even total support for the regime? So I was wondering if you could maybe give us a view of where perhaps China, the European Union, just some of the key players.
Yeah, the UN, United Nations, especially the review, the annual the review of human rights of countries. Actually, there were 50 nations, including the US, who expressed concern about the killings in the country. There are three recommendations: stop the killing, and then investigation, and to hold those responsible accountable. It was a UN body. The EU, European Union, also came out, with their own position against this killing. So there is now, especially the pressure on the ICC to act on that information, because it is very crucial. The investigation, because other nations can just express concern from them feelings, but there has to be an action from the International Criminal Court, crimes against humanity, that will hold him accountable.
Father, thank you very much for your enlightening and if so shocking presentation. One thing about the issue is it is well covered. It's certainly well covered in the American press, and I suspect it's well covered elsewhere. So at least people know about it, and this will help build up some pressure. Well, my question is this. One of the things we hear is that Duterte, not too long ago, had 90% plus approval ratings. He's still in the 70s. Now this suggests that a lot of people are in favor of this policy and that there's a lot of public support for it. Could you comment on this, how this happens to be, and what's the solution? Perhaps this is a bigger problem than Duterte himself.
Okay, first, surveys can be manipulated. This is statistics. If the question is, do you support the war on drugs? Of course, everybody support the war on drugs. That is very high. Do you support the killings? 80% says no. We want to prepare them to keep alive. So if you speak about the killings themselves, there is little support for that. Of course, the trust ratings is still high. But what is our concern? And this was already expressed by the bishop. So there are a lot of Filipinos who continue to support the killings, or not the killings, but the policy that links war on drugs and the killings. And it's still about how, we are 82% Catholics. And you add, 90%, more than 90% Christians. But you have to ask the question, how come that in a predominantly Catholic country, where 7 million will attend the Mass of the Pope, where 10 million attend that procession of the Nazareno, how is it possible that this is happening? It's all about the question of the link between religion and morality. You can attend Mass, you can attend those processions, but the basic teachings of the Church, how we live our lives, the respect for human dignity, respect for human rights, there is a disconnect. And that is why that one of the important tasks of a prophetic community is, how do we form the conscience of the people? And how, so this is one of the, this is troubling for me, because before the elections, majority of the priests in Mindanao supported Duterte. How is it possible for priests who heard about these killings in Davao will support? Of course, they were regionalistic. We are from Mindanao, then you support a candidate from Mindanao. That's another explanation. Or probably, again, the whole idea of the populist temptations, looking for a strong leader, a Messiah, that will solve our problems. And even if it involves shortcut, even if it involves violation of human rights.
Magandang gabi po, Madam. Thank you for showing us the act of hope and courage. Last Sunday we had Paring Bert, and he gave us the same message that we might be on the stage of darkness, but we always have to look for the new light of the dawn. So to heed your call to continue the pressure, I would like to plug my organization, the Filipino American Human Rights Alliance, and if any one of you would be interested to participate in passing the Senate 1055, which will prevent the U.S. sending military aid to the Philippines, and that's one. And also to make sure that all funding that will go to the Philippines will have to follow specific human rights report. So that would be good. So approach me after this meeting, and we are still doing this raising of awareness. My question is, after we reach the season of conscientization, do you see the season of revenge to come?
You know, that is something that we cannot predict, you know. Of course, we always teach that people do not follow the path of revenge. But you know, a lot of the people, especially the poor who are grieving, are also angry. And it is a very dangerous mix, because victims, you know, often claim the right to strike back. That is why this is the work of the church, to make sure that the whole process is peaceful, to avoid a violent counteraction, you know, a violent response. So always follow the path of peace, the path of non-violence.
Magandang gabi po. Ako po si Maya. And thank you again for this wonderful talk today. I'm part of the Chicago Committee for Human Rights in the Philippines, as well as a youth organizer for the Fellowship for Filipino Migrants. And I really want to commend you for coming out today and speaking up against the human rights violations happening in the Philippines. When we brought human rights leaders from Karapatan, peace consultants, and indigenous leaders from the Philippines in the summertime, we were really worried about them going back home, because we understood the gravity of speaking out and how that can mean really that you're sacrificing your life because the government might take it. And so, you know, I also want to uplift the name of Father Tito Paez, who was a priest who was killed in Luzon by masked men who are assumed to be agents of the government, because he was a human rights activist. And I wanted to also bring light to the fact that I believe just last year that the Commission for Human Rights in the Philippines was, the budget was decreased to about, I think, was it like $20 US. And that, to me, really shows that Duterte's regime has no concern for human rights, right? And even just this past ASEAN, which was celebrated as though it was a huge holiday in the Philippines, which in reality meant that Trump was having backdoor talks with Duterte, and not once did he bring up the 13,000 people killed in the drug war. And I wanted to hear kind of what your response is on these very blatant attacks, these very blatant taking away of funds or disregard for human rights, both of Trump and Duterte.
Well, you know, knowing Duterte, I am not surprised, because he will try everything to go after you. That is already expected. About Trump, well, you know, are they so brothers, or but at least Trump has not resorted to that squad, but we can never tell. But you will try everything. Like the recent one on Rappler, because he controls all the levels of government to go after you. So that is expected. Once you begin to speak out, we'll always remember that it's never safe. In Davao, there was a newsman, June Pala. Every morning he'd say, "Welcome to Davao, the city of the Philippines and everything." And he got so mad, and we believe that he was killed on orders of Duterte. It was only when Bato and Las Cañas came out, and they confirmed what we already knew beforehand. That they were the ones that were really doing the operation. So this is always the danger. In a society that is authoritarian, that is bloody, you expect that if you stand out, you're going to risk your life. This is what I'm trying to, I've been risking my life ever since, but so far I've been lucky. But I'm not complacent. I no longer run or walk to my work office. It's 8 kilometers. I used to run or walk, but now I have the motorbike and I vary my schedule. I usually get information from DPDN. I circle telling me what is the level of threat for me this week. But that's part of being prophetic. Be prepared to lay down your life.
Hi, I'm Julian. I'm with Addicts Chicago. I just wanted to thank you for talking about these the religious aspect and all of this, and the organizing that's going on within the religious community. And I was wondering if you could maybe elaborate on what the religious community is doing now, especially in response to some of the attacks by the Philippine National Police and Armed Forces of the Philippines against other religious leaders, and maybe if there are any interfaith organizing that's happening currently, if you could possibly expand on that.
Yeah, this is happening because when we advocate peace and human rights, it's not just Catholics. We always work with other, because it is not a problem of Catholics alone. There is always collaborations with other faith communities and faith groups, and that is why that if you have all these rallies, for example, maybe it's organized by the CWCIT, but you get also others coming from other churches, and there are groups like Rise Up, for example. Rise Up is actually an ecumenical group, Catholics, Protestants, and other, where there are various groups that are supporting. So this is not a one denominational approach. It's always, speak about the ecumenism of praxis. That's always been even during martial law. That you cannot go on it alone. You have to work and collaborate with others. And so you speak about ecumenism. It's not just inter-religious dialogue. It is inter-religious practice, working together for peace, for the defense of human rights, for the ecology, for the environment.
My question is a little bit personal, but my question is, what advice do you have for outreach, particularly in reaching to people who support Duterte, particularly when they are a family member?
That is always difficult, because even within my own family, there are some who are, we call it DDS, they are Duterte supporters. But the question is, you have to go back to the basics. Suppose I am an addict, and I'm on the list. How would you react? If I am him, are you going to you have to do it personally also, And you have to let them look at, these are not just numbers, these are people. Whether you are, your son has been led astray, use of drugs. But you do not. It's not a question of whether you support Duterte or not. It is a question of whether is it right to kill a person because he is either an addict or because is against the government. And it's not even, has not even taken up arms. Have to go back to the basic moral issues about is it really right to kill someone because they've been addicted to drugs? If he is your brother or sister, what are you going to do? And that is where I think it's so important.
Okay, I think this is going to be the last question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Father, for coming to Chicago. My name is Joseph Carriosa. I'm the Journal of the I read your blog that in trying to get the attention of the Duterte government, you run around the Philippines and you bike. Now, since you want to have an international attention in this, do you want to extend your running around the world instead of just the Philippines? Thank you very much.
You know, my last adventure, I actually biked around the Philippines. That was in 2008, Davao, back to the 5 to some kilometers. It was biking and preaching about the gospel of life and peace. And the last one was when it was 2011. I was assigned to Manila. Instead of riding the plane, I said, better walk from Davao, Manila, and to Apare. Again, it's for a cause. Right now, I don't have intention of running around the world. I have myocardial ischemia and atherosclerosis, so I have. Well, I can still walk. I walked the Camino recently from French Pyrenees to San Carlos de Tocos, 100 kilometers. But I will be, when I go back, I will be biking for life at peace from Manila across Bicol, Samar, Leyte, Mindanao, and then to my hermitage. And that will be my last. But I used to bike 200 kilometers a day, but now I'm older. I'm 64 years old, and I have some heart conditions. It will be 100 kilometers a day. But, still be preaching about. Number one is to stop the killings at the hidden. Number two is no to martial law. And number three is resume the peace process between the NDF and the government. That will be my cry. And I will be biking alone. Although some will join me part of the way, but I've just been doing that on my own. But that's all I can do, to bike and to preach about it. And in my own little way, to draw attention to these issues and concerns.